Have the Jags done everything so far to maximize having Trevor Lawrence? We'll talk about that and more here on another episode of Locked On Jaguars.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What up, good people? I'm Tony Wiggins, the host of the Locked On Jaguars podcast, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast, where it's your team every day. And we thank you for making us your first listen. And if this is truly your first listen, we welcome you and embrace you and ask that you continue to tune in to Locked On Jaguars, where we try to be organic and hit it hard as we can every day to get you the type of information that you need. Another thing of note is we are free on all platforms. Wherever you get your podcast, you will know that we will be there. You won't pay for it. That's right. Free on all platforms. Make sure you like and subscribe on the YouTube page as well. This particular episode of Locked On Jaguars is brought to you by Nissan. The only thing more exciting than the big game is the all-new, all-electric 2023 Nissan Ariya. There's only so many days left until the Super Bowl. I'm thinking 4 or 5 right now. Are you ready? The Nissan Ariya, the EV for people who love to drive. Learn more at nissanusa.com. That's all one. There's no gaps in there. nissanusa.com. No gaps in our coverage either here of the Jaguars, even though they're not playing, and we wish they were still playing at this point. But we want to talk today about whether or not they'll have a chance to consistently push and challenge to be playing a lot. This is the 5th championship game for the Chiefs. You counted it, 5th. 3rd Super Bowl for Patrick Mahomes in 5 years. They are maximizing their opportunities with their franchise quarterback, and I want to know if the Jaguars are on their way or if they have already started the process to do the same thing. Now, in order to do that, I have to peel back a layer of your emotions and your happiness about the way that this season ended and the fact that everybody from Peyton Manning to whoever you want to talk to basically saying, they're stealing Deion Sanders' phrase, we coming. The Jaguars are coming. They're on their way to being able to consistently play in these types of games. However, we know from our personal experiences with 2017 or 2017, however you want to say it, that nothing is promised. The Jaguars had a young, fiery, best defense in the league. Considered, the fans wanted to put it to say, hey, man, Legion of Boom, Steel Curtain, Baltimore Bullies, we are right there, the 85 Bears. This team, there are people that said that defense was top 5 that they'd ever seen, right? So if that's the case, the very next year, that defense was still a top 5 defense, even though they slipped and we're not the best defense in the league anymore. And then 2 years later, everything broke up and they started trading players. So we've been in a situation where we've knocked on that door. In fact, the Jaguars did that back in 1997 and again in 1999, where they looked like this young up-and-coming team that was knocking on the door and that was going to apply pressure to everyone and anyone for a long period of time, and it just didn't happen. So miss us here with all of the grandiose promises of, well, you guys got it and all of this stuff until we actually do it. Now, I know I'm not naive. There's a couple of caveats here that make this seem more realistic, right? One is a true franchise quarterback who has all the tools and all the time and the makeup from what we've seen to actually go down as one of the greats of this generation, right? Trevor Lawrence. We have one of not very many who can do the things that he can do on the football field. And then we have a Super Bowl winning coach who has already shown the ability to really galvanize the team and get them over the hump. And this year, he did the same thing with the Jaguars, although it wasn't the ultimate hump. They went and lost on the road to the team that's representing the AFC in the Super Bowl. So there's actually more for us to really be enthusiastic about, more for us to be optimistic about, more for us to be in tune with our emotions, where we want to believe the absolute best. But we can actually functionally say that rationally we can do that without going over the top. But I still have to examine it, because for me it's just too important. So what we're going to do today is going to take a look at what Trent Baalke did in last year's draft, the 2022 draft, what Trent Baalke did in 2021, because unlike most people, I'm not one of those people. I believe from a coaching and a psychological and a mental standpoint that this year was the first year of their rebuild, that last year under Urban Meyer did not count, right? But I'm going to flip that a little bit, and I'm going to tell you why I may be wrong in some of the things that I'm saying. If what Urban didn't count, then we're not fully giving Doug Pederson credit for everything that he did. For instance, if you got a home site, right? And whatever Urban did, they tore it down, correct? And Doug Pederson came up. It's not as if Doug Pederson came up to an empty lot. Doug Pederson came up to a pile of rubble. So they had to do removal first, right? Demolition was already done, or maybe they had to do a little demolition too. Maybe demolition happened the day that they, put Urban on a plane and sent him out of here. But he admittedly had to repair some guys, right? It's almost like showing up to basketball practice out of shape. Well, the coach can't teach you everything because you're getting winded. So now he has to get you in shape, right? Instead of just teaching you stuff. So he didn't come into a situation where he just organically had to teach people things or he taught people things. He came into a situation where he had to undo the negative psyche that had already happened to this team. And he had probably had to teach these guys at a pace that he didn't really want to teach them at. When you consider what he did to get the Jaguars as division champs and win a playoff game and to go on the road and be very, very competitive against the Kansas City Chiefs in the divisional, he didn't come from ground zero, if you will. And I'll use that term loose. I'm using it loosely, but you know what I mean. I'm not talking about 9/11. I'm talking about what we consider an even level playing field. He actually came in negative territory. He came in a hole in the ground. He came in with the foundation that had been shaken, and they had to reboot all of that stuff. You got to fix the slab. You got to rewire it. You got to do everything. So he actually went further and did more than we're probably going to give him credit for. We have to say that what Urban didn't count positively, but what Urban Meyer did definitely affected the way that this club was last year. So now for him, this is year 2, and he's starting off fresh. Trent Baalke does not get that pass. And that's why I went through all of that rigmarole, because what Trent Baalke has done, he has been here for 2 years. All right? For 2. So there's going to be this debate whether or not it was Baalke making the picks, whether it was Urban making the picks, because definitely they did take a lot of people that former staff was familiar with. I don't think a lot of people are angry at that now, because most of those guys, especially the ones up front, are in play to make a lot of plays for this team over the years. Case in point, the no-brainer selection of Trevor Lawrence is one. Travis Etienne was the other. Walker Little, Tyson Campbell. You see Andre Cisco. These are some very, very important players outside of Trevor that are on this team. Signing Jamal Agnew, who is a player that is not expendable. You can't afford to lose him. So I'm going to give Baalke some credit for that and not give Urban credit for. We won't give Urban credit for nothing, right? Except bad stuff. So what we're going to do here in segment 2 is I'm going to take a look at the draft picks from the last 2 years collectively. And then at the end of segment 2, we're going to look at the free agents. There's a disparity now. I think the draft picks have been fine. I got a little bit to say about the free agents, because this is the thing that I want you guys to focus on, or want all of us to focus on together. They were about $100 million under the cap before that first year started with Baalke. What has he done? Has he been judicious? Has he put the money and allocated the funds in the right spaces? Do they have guys under contract, or is it now time for the chicken to come home to roost, where we have to pay the piper and pay the credit card bill? I will discuss all of those things in just a second here after I get my breath on Locked On Jaguars. It's a good show, man. And then we'll talk a little bit about some of the things that's going on around the big game on Sunday. So don't go anywhere. Hang tough, man. We're doing it like we always do it here on Locked On Jaguars. We are going to get to all of this good information. But first, I have to let you know that today's show is sponsored by Prize Picks. That's right. I've been all over Prize Picks. My son is really all over Prize Picks. And he was about 1 yard away from winning. I think he made a $150 bet. He was about 1 yard away from winning a whole lot of money the other day. And you can be the same way if you go to prizepicks.com. First of all, it is not like any other game. You're playing against a computer. You're not playing against people. It's a daily fantasy game where they have entries, and those entries have player projections on them. And all you have to do is say whether they're going to go more or less. Now, if you have to use at least 2 or more, and you have to go between 2 and 6 players. And what will happen is on those projections, if you get them all right, you can win up to 25 times your money. Just download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. If you deposit 100, Prize Picks will give you 100. If you deposit 50, they'll give you 50. Don't forget to enter the promo code Locked On and sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. And we thank you for being here with us here on Locked On Jaguars. Did I just taste my words by accident? I think I did. I know some people that are going to absolutely give me grief about that. One of them is my mama. She's going to tell me, you smacking your lips. Yeah, mama, I'm smacking my lips. But got a reason to, because I'm trying to taste this pot of gumbo that the Jaguars are actually building and have been building over the last 2 years. When we think about them in 2 separate ways, one is the NFL draft. The other one is through free agency, because now that we're looking at the team, we're sitting there saying, man, they're struggling for cap space. They got to get the cap space. Well, Trent Baalke came out and said, it ain't about cap space, it's about cash. Something that somebody who used cap space up would say when you don't have any, right? So yeah, he's partially right. He's right. But I know some people don't want it to come from him because they are not big Trent Baalke fans. But that's all right. We're going to be as honest as we can about it. First of all, it's almost like you have to measure and ask yourself, is the duo of Trevor Lawrence and Doug Pederson, is that masking some problems? And we're going to end up right back where we were before. No, we're not going back to where we were, because Doug Pederson's too good a coach and Trevor Lawrence is too good of a football player. However, I think Trent Baalke could do a little bit better in free agency. Now, to his credit, he hit on those 2 wide receivers, Zay Jones and, of course, Christian Kirk. He nailed it. They also did a good evaluation of what Evan Ingram can do for them. And he had a really, really good season, especially by Jaguars standards, for someone at the tight end position, right? So he's hit this year in free agency, but we got to look back to 2 years ago. As much as we like Roy Robertson Harris, is he worth what they're about to pay him this year, which is $10 million? I don't know. And I've had a podcast before where I've kind of explained to people, you can't not want to get rid of. I have people say Roy Robertson Harris is a good leader. He might be. And this ain't nothing against him. If you listen to Roy, what's up, man? But the thing is we have fans saying that they need to improve the interior pass rush. And I know Roy Robertson Harris is one guy, but Devon Hamilton serves his purpose as the nose guard, right? Foley Fadukazi got a bunch of money last year, and they got a bunch of dead money tied to him for the next year or 2. So when you say they need someone, either they're overpaying one guy, or you don't think Devon Hamilton is good, or you're talking about Roy Robertson Harris. But even if you're not talking about him and you say they need someone, They're not going to just go out and get another big guy in free agency. If anything, they're going to go get a proven player that can give them some rush up front. We've had a lot of talk about Anthony Hargrove maybe being someone that they go after to affect the quarterback up the middle. Okay, if that floats your boat, then Roy Robinson Harris becomes a real nightmare of $10 million that is not starting. And that is something that you can't do because we are constantly talking about the reallocation or the allocation, the proper allocation of money. Could he be a candidate for a restructuring? Sure, he's young enough that you can stretch him out a little bit and restructure, maybe give him a few more $1 million of guaranteed money and lower his cap figure this year. I would not be opposed to that one bit. But here's the thing. That's what you have. Those are the type of things that you have to do and have to consider and say, well, how do we end up in this space in the first place? The one good thing about it is they can get rid of Shaquille Griffin and save $13 million. But you have to look back and say, was that signing any good? I recall when I talked to Corbin Smith, who covers the Seahawks with Locked On Seahawks, he told me, nah, man, I mean, he's a good guy, but I don't think he's worth the money. It turns out he was dead right. Shaq Griffin was not worth what they paid. Rayshawn Jenkins seems to be worth what they went out and paid. I'm going to do it all together. Foy Oluokun, who was a member of the 2022 class, is worth what they paid him. Jamal Agnew, who was in 21, worth what they paid him, right? Arden Key last year was a really good signing. I wish they'd have got him under contract for 2 years, but they didn't. He had a prove-it year, and he proved it, and now he's going to want to get paid. And this team says you need to improve the pass rush. Do you bring him back at a reasonable number? Do you draft someone else? And what I want to keep reminding folks is you can't just keep everybody and keep adding more people to them. It's not like we're playing Uno where you can end up with an Uno card for every situation on the board. You just don't get a chance to do that, right? So understand that every time you take something, you're probably going to have to give something. And in giving something, it means you're going to have to admit that a player that you may be emotionally attached to is someone that you're not going to stick with. And I think that's the hardest thing, especially coming off a year where the success was, and granted, 10-9 isn't really successful to a lot of people around here. That was very successful. So coming off the best season the Jaguars have had in a long time, the most promising season that they could potentially have had in their entire history. Well, maybe outside of the year they won 15 games. But my point is that, yeah, it's hard to tell folks that they have to do things a little bit differently when this is the best that they've ever felt something, right? So, like, one thing if I wish they could have done, I wish they would have kept Jay Tufele, but he probably, I don't know how much of a scheme fit or a mishap it was, but Jay Tufele went somewhere and started tackling people all over the place and had more tackle for losses and was beating coverages. So maybe that's one that got away that they should have held on to. And I think they're still paying him dead money for it too. So he's a 4th round pick. That's the kind of stuff that they cannot have. They have to be able to draft well. And we were talking about that earlier. Free agency is going to be hit or miss. And you should hit more than you miss because in free agency, what you do is you're actually picking from a bunch of proven players, right? And you don't have any restrictions. Well, with the draft, it's a little bit different. So we're going to go over more of these names, get more of this figured out for you. And what we'll do is we'll come to a little bit of a conclusion of where they might go. So you guys can stop choking me on social media. I'm just throwing stuff around and throwing stuff out there. This will go back to the point that I made before. And I talked about whether or not Trent Baalke, even though he had done a better job and had done a pretty good job, is Trent Baalke the one to take this team further? That's a big question everyone has to ask themselves. And like I said, it's hard to move on from someone when they've done so well in certain areas and the team has done well. So maybe we can come to the conclusion that Trevor and Doug are masking a few things. We'll talk about it more here in segment 3 coming up on Locked On Jaguars. After I let you know about today's sponsor being Built Bar. I have told you about Built Bar so much over the years that you can probably read this read by yourself, because Built Bar is the absolute truth. If you're looking for a delicious treat but don't want all the fat and calories, then you gotta go and try a Built Bar. What makes Built Bar so good? Well, for starters, they're all covered in 100% real chocolate. I could probably stop right there, and that'll be good enough for at least 80% of y'all. But that's right, real chocolate. And they come in unbelievable flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, oh my God, and coconut almond. I'm not sure how Built does it, but these bars taste like a candy bar while maintaining amazing macros. And that's what's even better, is that they are very healthy. Only 130 calories and 4 grams of sugar with a whopping 17 grams of protein. I want you to head to built.com, and that's where you can get your Built bars. But now you can get them at your local Walmart or your Sam's Club. That's right. Head to the nearest Walmart today, walk to the pharmacy section, and grab yourself a box of Built bars. You can pick up a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate, or coconut puffs. And if you're close to Sam's Club, run in and be greedy like me and grab a 13-bar box with our hit flavors, brownie batter and churro, and you can thank me later. Make sure you check out Built Bar. All right, rolling along here, segment 3 of Locked On Jaguars. I think Baalke's hiding behind, not necessarily hiding, but I think he's being concealed, if you will, by the fact that a lot of his draft picks and a lot of the top heavy guys that he went out to get in the draft and free agency are working out. And you say, well, that's not hiding or concealing. That's what it's supposed to do. Yeah, but there's some warts that happen, and nobody's going to bat 1,000, right? But there's some things that happen that probably could have happened a little bit differently. And you have to ask, moving forward, are they going to happen again? Well, not only are those guys playing well, but the reason they're playing well, particularly this year as opposed to last year, is the head coach, Doug Pederson, and the development of Trevor Lawrence. So with that being said, they're not going to fire Trent Baalke. They shouldn't. I know there was some talk earlier, maybe a month ago, that Baalke would take another role in the organization and stick around, but they would get somebody else to come in and be the personnel guy. I wouldn't be opposed to it at all, because it would sound like to me in that situation that Doug Pederson has his finger on everything, and he's the one that's doing it, right? But when you have a track record, and I'm going to go back and I'm going to look at this a little bit here. When you have a track record of Trevor Lawrence, Travis Etienne, Tyson Campbell, Walker Little, Andre Cisco, you can't really argue with it, right? You can't. Even though if Jay Tufele had stayed around and they kept him around and he'd be playing well, and if Jordan Smith not gotten injured, we would know whether he's going to be able to contribute as an edge rusher. So, but the thing is when you look at it, that's a good draft. That's a good draft regardless of how you felt about Urban Meyer or how you feel about Trent Baalke. As it turns out right now, those are some of the best players on the team, period, in the discussion. Last year, Trayvon Walker. I am still a Trayvon Walker fan, and everyone else who is a fan of Trayvon Walker, and if you know football, you should be too. But most will look at the numbers and say, told you we shouldn't have picked him. Or they would look at Sauce Gardner and say, see, if we'd taken a quarterback, we'd have bookend corners right now. Or if we'd taken Aiden Hutchinson, I don't know if Aiden Hutchinson would have got a whole bunch of sacks in the system that they're playing now. And I'm sure that they knew that they were going to drop their edges back in the coverage. That's probably why they didn't take Aiden Hutchinson. Devin Lloyd, is there a little bit of buyer's remorse? If I had to pin them down and say buyer's remorse, I would probably say they say yes, because they also traded up to get him from the second round and gave away, I think, a 4th round pick. Luke Fortner, no, they're very happy with Luke Fortner. Chad Muma, maybe. Snoop Conner in round 5, I don't think Snoop is going to be spectacular. I think they need 2 more running backs now that Jermichael Hasty is a free agent. Greg Jr. didn't stick around. Monteric Brown, there's still some stuff there for Monteric Brown to prove, but at the very least, he's out there running around. So you're basically talking about 2 guys that have not played, or Greg Jr., I don't think is on the team. Maybe he's on the practice squad, but Snoop hasn't played very much. Monteric, a little bit. If Monteric can develop into a nickel, that would really help them an awful lot. So the draft has been fine. And then when you look at free agency, when you look at Foye Oluwakan and you see that's the main guy, first of all. That's where I'm stuck. Darius Williams, it's been okay. I think they still want to probably upgrade the outside, but he doesn't play inside. So I know you'll see him for at least one more year here in Jacksonville. He's been good, Darius Williams. My man, Jamal Agnew, I'm really, really happy about them picking up Jamal Agnew. All the other stuff, besides the receivers I mentioned, and of course, Evan Ingram, I don't know, but that's still 6 really good free agents that I've mentioned. So they haven't been terrible in that respect either. Now, without every one of those free agents and draft picks that hit, I think the Jaguars would not have been in the playoffs. They needed every single one of them. So from that perspective, yeah, they're on fire and they're doing what they're supposed to do. But here's the question. They're up against it with the salary cap. So there's going to be a limited number of people that they can go out and add because they're trying to basically they're in retention mode and re-sign mode of the guys that they already have, right? And that's why when some people say, well, why do you want to trade certain players? I want to trade certain players that if you know they don't have any future, I want to get the guys here that are going to be here to make a run for the next 3-4 years, not just squeezing the last little bit of juice out of somebody that you picked 4 years ago. That's why me personally, I'm trying to just move on so they can get to the core guys that they need. With another good draft and a nice free agency period where they restructure and they're able to do some things and maybe even go out and add 1 or 2 players, I think the Jaguars can improve and be better. Whether or not the record displays that, because their schedule is going to get tougher, is another thing. But yeah, I think they're on point. The biggest thing for me is the training camp and all of those days that they spend now with Doug Pederson, where he's no longer digging them out of a hole. Now he's starting from, they got a nice foundation built, that they even got a little bit of elevation. They got all of the things that are going on from a organizational standpoint that are in fabulous shape. Now they need to hit on 1 or 2 more players, and the guys that they have to get better and stay healthy. And I think the Jaguars are on pace to maximize every single thing that has to do with Trevor Lawrence's value. But the one thing I will say is, and I know they won't do this because they're a professional organization, you have to take your emotions out of these personnel decisions and actually improve the team. Here's one way to do it. Not the guy you're taking off or the guy you want to trade or the person that you want to upgrade. The people that are left, you're doing them a favor by getting a better player. You're doing them a favor by getting them some more help. You're doing them a favor that you're loading them up with some cargo that's going to help them get past Kansas City. That's how you have to do it, and I hope the Jaguars brass gets that done. Going to look forward to the offseason, and I know you guys will too. Till then, you guys continue to check out Locked On Jaguars here every single day, where it's your team every day, making us your first listen, and we'll see you next time.